good. All right, Mr. Larry. Well, welcome to our first podcast at Muscle and Minutes PT Insights and Bite-Sized Bits. My name is Dr. Cole. I am a physical therapist here at Phoenix Fit Physical Therapy, located in the nice suburbs of Frisco, Texas right now, and kind of North Dallas, DFW area. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, my good sir, Mr. Larry?
My name's Larry Hernandez, and I am a physical therapist assistant and clinic owner in the Richardson, Texas area. So serving mobile patients and also patients at the clinic. So, yeah.
Yeah. And when we kind of discussed this in passing here and there about wanting to start a podcast, so I think it was just kind of a way to do it. So we'll see how this goes, but I know overall we really wanted to kind of create this space to just kind of educate our fellow peers, right? And to just help also educate the general population about what we do and just kind of our specialties in this area. And then and towards other clinicians, just like, hey, here's some more, tools to utilize, some more educations. That way we can really improve the outcomes out in our space. I know you're a big gym goer and you've had some time out there in the PT space. So why don't you go a little bit more in depth about your credentials, and that way we'll at least have it on wraps about
on record. So I legitimize myself, right?
Yeah.
Well, come June this year, I'll be practicing officially 18 years. So just a few years. And then prior to that, I was a PT. I was a PT technician. So for 2 years, so close to 2 decades coming up in June. Man, I have a lot of certifications over the years, just 18 years of taking CEUs. But I'd probably say the most significant ones was probably the SFMA, FMS, and dry needling. And so those have really helped me be better as a clinician over the last, I think I got that in 2013. So almost, a little over 10 years. And so those have been so significant in helping me get better outcomes with patients and then even myself. I had a shoulder injury back in 2013 around the time I took those courses.
Right.
And, fell down skiing and really impinged my shoulder really bad. And at the time, I was only practicing at a skilled nursing facility. I wasn't really doing outpatient, so I was really not adept into like treating specific, like down to the shoulder. And so those courses were really important for me to treat myself.
Yeah. No, I understand. I think that's how a lot of clinicians kind of get into it too. Is like, at least when I've talked to students, there's always an injury, and even when I talk to seasoned veterans, much like yourself, it's kind of the same way as they start slowly specializing through injury, through treating themselves, kind of going that route. For myself, I've been a clinician now for a little over 2 years, so a little bit newer to the game, if you will, but I've been a certified personal trainer for 7 years now. Been a running coach for 4 to 5. And so that then kind of reels me into my specialty in terms of runners and those kind of endurance athletes, especially, when they're on their feet versus, biking or anything like that. And, I kind of subspecialize in neck because much like yourself, I, had an injury, but I was involved in a car accident, got whiplash, which, that has a very big stigma on it. So I kind of went down that route as well. But yeah, you kind of just start building up this skill set, and then next thing you know, you're specialized out there, and it's really fun. So
ever since I got that shoulder injury, now that's my deal now. I love shoulders. So
oh yeah, and I know we talk all the time, and I love runners. They're like the simplest thing once you really get down into it, and when you feel that specialized, you're like, oh, I've treated myself, and then next thing it's 5 shoulders or 10 runners, and then you're like, well, I can do this in my sleep. But going into rehab then and into our settings, the one thing I really
what are we talking about today?
Yeah, I know, right? Enough about ourselves. You know, why the people are coming to us is
Why
I
are
really
listening?
wanted
Yeah.
to discuss this myth around our three sets of 10 reps, right? And so I've seen a lot of TikToks out there, and then there's always a whole bunch of students whenever I ask them, whether it be in your clinic or other clinics I've been in, you know, what do you want to do this exercise for? And they're like, 3 sets of 10, right? It's kind of like the go-to answer in the rehab world, which
it's the good answer, but not always the best answer, right? You know, and as
yeah,
therapists,
exactly.
I was talking to my student this morning because I have a student here. You met him right now. We've had several students here at the clinic, and I said, you know, the best thing you can do as a therapist is learn clinical reasoning. And so, what is the best thing to do for a patient? There's a lot of good answers, but what is the best, right? And I was like, when you take your state board, that's what they're going to be asking you, because there's going to be two answers that are like, hey, these are both good, but which one's the best, right? And so what's the best thing you can do for that certain patient right in front of you right now, you know? So
yeah, exactly. And you know, for those people that may not be more in depth in the working out world, right? You know, sets are typically like your bracket, and then your repetitions are how many you're doing per bracket, if you will. So if we say 3 sets of 10, and we'll go with like a high pull in this instance, we want you to do 10 high pulls, rest a little bit, and then do another set of 10. And then that just kind of defines that, right? And so, you know, one of these big things is, you know, future clinicians, and you know, I even have seen some fairly seasoned ones that, you know, yeah, they fall into this hole of just 3 sets of 10 and everything, which I love 3 sets of 10. I'm not going to bash on 3 sets of 10, but it's kind of to your point, it's like that clinical reasoning of why are you, you know, prescribing this kind of exercise, right? In terms of
and that's
what it
exactly
is.
what we do. We prescribe, right? You know, muscle is, or movement is medicine, right? And so when we tell someone to do a specific amount of reps, it should be specific to that person, just like a doctor is giving someone milligrams of medication, right? Or we're giving them movements, maybe it's a high pull for a shoulder or press. That's our medicine, right? That's our, you know, essentially the doctors are giving medications, but we're giving, you know, movements, and then the reps and schemes are our dosage, right? And so we're not just doing the same thing for each patient. It's, you know, if we want to be good clinicians, right, we want to be able to give what specific dosage and medicine to that person so that they are achieving their goals or getting better, right? So
yeah, 100%. And you know, I agree with that, and I think that's a lot of what, you know, I talk about too, especially with patients, because they kind of get in the same, you know, little route of, oh, okay, yeah, it's just always 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10, da 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 da. And you know, to kind of touch on the variables of why, you know, sets and reps matter, because it comes down to intensity, right, of that prescription that we're going to prescribe. Just like you said, it's, you know, we want to achieve a certain amount of intensity, we want to have a certain amount of purpose for those exercises, so maybe like a high pull, right? And then there's kind of that, the whole purpose of a set. And I know, I've told so many patients this is the intention of a set is to have breaks in between. You know, you'll have
they
those
just want to take them
patients.
off, so they just want to get it done, right?
They'll go all 30, right? And they'll just like pop, and just bang them out. And I'm like, well, one, clearly that means it wasn't enough for you, right? Yeah, it's too easy. Or two, it was like you either weren't focused on the intention of the movement, right? And so the rest portion is just as critical as I think, you know, the activation is. And so
and the tempo, right? I mean, I deal a lot with shoulders, and so a lot of shoulders that have, you know, it's tendinopathy, man, a majority of the time, I don't know the percentages, right? But majority of the times I'm dealing with tendinopathies. And, you know, right now I'm working with a, you know, a power lifter guy, and he bench presses 330 pounds. But guess what? I'm having him do chest press right now with a dumbbell at 30 pounds. So it's not nowhere near 330 pounds. And I'm having him do it at a tempo of 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up. And it kicks his butt, man. He is sweating and he's just unstable, right? Because he's been so used to just explosive like that, which is what got him injured, right? He never practiced any type of tempo, right? And so, Another little snippet there.
100%. And it all goes down to those kind of three variables, of like your time under tension, your rest breaks, your, weight resistance, etc. And so, as we start going into choosing those types of repetitions and sets for, our patients and our clients, it's kind of just like you said, it's like, okay, sure, you may be able to move a whole bunch of weight, but can you control the weight? Can you activate the appropriate muscle? Or when you're moving, like you said, I don't know, 330 pounds, which is insane. Like, are you going for like an explosive movement? Is it even a safe movement? And you just happen to get it up, right? So, there's a lot of, there's just a lot of thought process, or there should be anyway, behind our prescription there, right? And so, even if we look into the science of our sets and reps, right? When we talk about our rep range, and I know our seasoned gym goers kind of know this, but for the general pop, they don't always know this. So it's like your 1 to 10 repetition range, maybe your 1 to 8 to 10, etc. Your focus there is generally going to be strength, right? We're just trying to generate some power, move some heavy stuff. And so you're really looking at some heavier weights, because of that repetition is down. That doesn't necessarily mean lower volume, but just means, again, that kind of depends on the set aspect of it. But then, you move into that 10 to 19 range, and now you're looking at, neuromuscular controlling that range. You're looking a little bit on endurance if you're on that higher side. And again, you could even really target hypertrophy depending on how many sets you do there. And then obviously when you get to that 10 plus range, like those people that want to bang out 30 reps, right? That's endurance, right? It's just like, which for runners is great when they're running multiple miles, 5K, 10Ks, etc. Like that is an important aspect, but you're taking less away from strength, right? And then trying to reinforce our muscle kind of oxygen levels and just saying, hey, can you sustain a certain amount of stress through this tissue for this amount of time, right? So, and if you kind of notice, which I always like to bring about when I talk to my patients and clients, is like 10 is in 2 of those ranges. It's in our strength range, and it's in that like kind of neuromuscular.
It's the Goldilocks zone. It's like the Goldilocks zone.
Exactly. And so that's exactly where, 3 sets of 10 comes from. But then it's like you have to focus on that stress, like you said. It doesn't have to be 100 plus pounds. It can be 30 pounds, but then you're slowing that tempo down, right? Or you're lightening the load, or you're increasing the load, etc. So I'll have plenty of patience, and I'll start throwing out all these types of sets and reps, 4 sets of 8, or maybe we'll do 2 sets of like 15 and stuff. And
I've seen your documentation. Yes.
I've
seen it.
They're everywhere. But I think it's just important, and and it's a lot of people don't understand that kind of science behind the sets and reps. And then when you take it to a clinical setting, it's like, man, there's so much you can do with so little, right? You don't need a whole bunch of weights and shiny tools, even though, as we all know, I love my new shiny pieces of equipment as well. So in terms of shoulder, so like you just mentioned with your shoulder guy, do you have any preferred like sets and reps that you like to kind of prescribe these people, or what's kind of your take on all this?
Well, a lot of times it depends too on kind of how their pain is, right, too, as well. Like I have certain guidelines, and so I always tell the patients, like, I am not one of those therapists, which I know there's some therapists out there that is more pain is gain. I want some pain, I want some irritation, because I want us to be affecting the muscle, so we're creating some change. But like right now I'm doing 3 sets of 6 with that guy, and so because he really needs to focus on some stability and strength right now, because he has that quick or the fast twitch fibers right now where he's explosive, but his slow twitch fibers are not so great, and so we're working some of that right now. And so 3 sets of 6 right now, and I tell him, hey, no pain above 5 out of 10. If so, we're going to reduce some of this weight. And I shoot for an RPE. I ask them which is rate of perceived exertion. And so I tell them, hey, I want this to be a 6 or 7 difficulty level. And then also, if your pain is above 5 out of 10, let me know, because pain is always going to trump intensity in this case right now. And so right now, we're doing a lot of low reps right now with him, trying to build some strength and stability, so we're doing presses, we're doing shoulder taps and scat push-ups, just trying to get his scapula to get some stability, because he has really good, strong chest muscles. But when it comes to kind of the scapular stability, it's not there, and so that's kind of how he got injured. And I've seen this injury multiple times. I have some gym goers that come to me quite a bit. And bench press is just one of those manly movements that guys love to do.
I get it.
and it's like, how much is your bench, right? The big three of, squat, deadlift, and bench, right? So what's your, what do they call that? I think it's in CrossFit, it's called the CrossFit. I can't remember right now, but those big three right now.
Yeah, I just call them the big three personally.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I was in there working bench today, so that's the first thing I think
But then
about.
also, we're doing also some bands right now, 7 pounds. So again, this guy benches 330 pounds, and we're doing some crossover symmetry reverse flies with 7 pounds of resistance, and that's a struggle for him, because again, I'm working some tempo and I'm having him go at a nice controlled pace. I'm saying, hey, relax your neck, because the neck is an accessory muscle to the shoulder, but it shouldn't be a primary mover. So if your neck's hurting, your shoulder might be weak, might,
For sure.
So again, but so we're doing high reps with the bands right now. So it's all over the place right now. So
Yeah, definitely. And, to kind of piggyback off of that, I see a lot of runners, obviously, and if they do work out at all, they're kind of the opposite of that, in terms of they want a whole bunch of reps, because they're like, oh, like, one, I don't really want to get huge, which, that's always a fun conversation to have. I'm like, trust me, you're probably not going to get exactly right. Trying to be, speed. I want to get in that speed slot, right? Less wind resistance, and that's great, but so we'll just do high reps. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess for your sport, that's true. But, then they're coming to me injured, and they're like, man, I don't like lifting heavy, or I've just never really been a gym goer. I've always kind of done my body weight stuff. And it's like, well, as we progress through the injury, like you said, pain is kind of our point of where we typically like to focus, which for me, I love that 3 sets of 10 is just kind of like a baseline. Like, okay, can we get to all 30 with that rest break, or do we start having pain and need to address, what kind of stress we're putting through that tissue, right? And so, I actually start going on that opposite spectrum of even going down towards like the plyometric range. So a really explosive power. So kind of, like the reverse training process that you're going through with your guy, and really starting to get into like 5 sets of 5, 6 sets of 5, because I'm training them to like jump, or
it's a different sport, right? It's a different deal, right? And so the process of rehab is different. I have a hot take for you, to kind of piggyback on what you're talking about. So I have been taught, in my wide range of exposure to education, that there are certain activities that would be categorized as cyclic, like cyclic movements, right? And those tend to break down. And then there's, on the other aspect, of like strength, that tend to build. And that's what I'm talking about, like muscle and tendon health. And so would you say that a lot of runners and cyclers do so much cyclic activity that they don't focus on the strength, right? And then these strength people, maybe they do so much strength stuff, they don't have, the stability or the endurance in that area. And so it's like, I guess my hot take is, do you think runners and cyclers are just breaking down their bodies and bodybuilders aren't,
Oh man, that is a tough, that's a tough question, but it is interesting, because you look at you look at actual bodybuilders, not necessarily the ones that are trying to be strong, like in the gyms, right? But like the ones that are going in competitions and they're trying to fine tune every piece of muscle fiber on their body so they can look good and oil and tanness under light, right? And what's crazy, if you actually kind of look at the literature, they have one of the lower injury rates, right? Out of all, versus like strongman or like you said, endurance runners, right? That are kind of so fine tuned in either the cyclic kind of motion, very prolonged, just da 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 da, right? Or the opposite spectrum of like the strongman kind of explosive, like just get up and over my shoulder kind of thing. So I think there is I think it just comes down to rounding out the body, right? You can't just always be cyclic. You can't always just be explosive, because to your point, if you're always explosive to your guy, right, you're not having that dedicated focus of control and stability. And when you don't have that stability, all you need in a half of a second is a quick little, wrong shift, or the weight just happens to move weird, right? And then you get injury. And then it's kind of like the opposite for the cyclical runners. It's like they can't respond to a quick sudden change of something, right? You roll your ankle. I can roll my ankle, pop up, run 2 steps, and I'm good to go, and I'm just going, right?
I cannot.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of runners can't, and that's how they just get ankle sprains, and then they're out for like a month. But they don't build that resistance, on the other side. So to your hot take, I definitely think it's, I don't think either one is bad, but I think there's definitely extremes, right? And then when you train in one extreme for so long, one set or rep range, it's like you're not balancing out the body. Whereas when you see those true muscle builders, right, and they're trying to get all these muscles, they have one of the most well-rounded physiques just in general, in that regard, because they've tried to balance their body out so it looks good for these shows. So yeah, and to say cyclic is breaking down personally, it just kind of depends. You really don't see it with like crazy runners unless, like you're going for, the marathon and above range for sure, because then it really is just a really prolonged time to be in that cyclic range. But and you have to balance yourself out. And so I do advocate for runners and endurance people to like, hey, get some plyometrics in, get some like explosive movements, whether that be high pulls, or if you can safely do a hang clean, like teach your body how to explode, right?
I like to do single leg hops with runners. That's my go-to.
Well,
like I have a girl right now that she I think you met her. She had the double knee scopes on both legs. And I said, when's the last time you ran? And because she plays tennis, but she doesn't run for the ball, so it just walks. And I was like, so you want to get back to running, right? And she said, yes. And so I said, okay, well, let's try some single leg hops. And she just can't do it right now on that affected side that she had the surgery on. And I said, all right, that's going to be something we work on right now. And we scale it back because she couldn't do a single leg hop. So we're just doing, all right, let's get some strength, right? You have really weak calves right now, so we're going to work on some calf strengthening, and then we'll get to the hops. So we'll try some hopping, but I think right now, we're not there. But that's going to be my goal for her is, hey, some single leg hops, because anytime you're running, that leg is having to shock absorb. And if you can't run and shock absorb, your knee's going to feel it. So
So my question to you then right now is, when you're, like you said, trying to build strength, what are your sets and reps that you're going in for her versus, or what type of, weights, if you're having her do weights right now, kind of what does her routine look like when you're for those calves?
Well, my goal will probably to build her up to around 30 reps. But right now we started with like 3 sets of 6 to 8. But that's my goal. I tell her, hey, like we're gonna start 3, 6 to 8, and then we're gonna progress for like 12 to 15, and our goal will be to get to 30 reps where you can do at least single leg raises at least 30 reps. Because if she wants to get back to running, her calf is just going to need to have some pretty good sustained activity to be able to tolerate some sustained activity. and lift her body. And so we're shooting for 30 at some point, but we just started because, I mean, like I said the other day, hopping, I was like, all right, we're not hopping yet. And so like, let's just get some strength, you know. But that's where I'm at right now, you know. The goal is going to be 30. So because she wants to get back to running, and so
I would encourage 40 reps. I've a lot of other physios out there and physical therapists out there. I say physios because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and they're all out in the UK or Australia, and they all go by physios. But
I like physio. I like that word.
It's a cool name, right? It makes it sound more scientific, not just kind of like he's just a physical therapist. He's just a guy on the road. And that's like no. I'm a prestigious physio.
A physio. Yes, it sounds very elegant.
But they always advocate for 40 for their runners because and it's the same point that you kind of go, and that's 40 in a row. So that's not taking any rest break. So if they can't get to that 40 mark of one set of 40, then that is a big deficit. And to your point, like you're saying, running is like you do a lot of shock absorbing in those calves. There's man, I know I'm going to mess up these numbers. I'll have to pull up the research later, but there's a research that I recently read that said runners, and granted, they took some pretty fast runners. They said moderate pace, but they clocked them in at like 7:30 pace. And for the average runner, that's pretty quick over like 3+ miles.
I haven't run a 7-minute mile since high school. So
I did the other day, but you know, it wasn't for very long.
I saw your times at your 5K. I saw your time for your 5K. You were averaging like 7:20 or something like that.
Yeah, it said like 7:22 or just below 7:14 or something, somewhere in there. But and so, but what they showed is over the course of, and I think it was a 5K. I'd have to double check if it was 5K or 10K because it does make a difference there. But they said like the calves, specifically the soleus part, you know, absorbed and produced anywhere up to like 10,000 pounds worth of just force. But just every time they landed to push off, right? So, you know, you think about an injury, again, it's like you need to be able to withstand that type of pressure. And when you really think about it, you know, when I really try to bulk up, which I know I'm like the biggest guy in the office, especially right now. You know, when I really try to bulk up these guns, you know, it's all about volume. So going into my sets and reps, it's like I could still do a high rep range of like 10, but then if my sets are 10 sets of 10 at what is it? Typically aim for like 68%, you know, my 1 rep max. It's like, you're going to go into that strength of just, and hypertrophy range of just massive muscles. I always like to make sure that I'm functionally strong too. So I don't, you know, that's why I really tone it down in my, you know, cutting season. So, but
I think that's why I love CrossFit. You know, CrossFit, I don't have to think about my reps and schemes. Sometimes I'll program some of my corrective movements, my rehab movements per se, kind of like in a CrossFit type scheme. Like one of the popular schemes in CrossFit is 21-15-9. And so I might pick 3 movements and say, all right, we're going to do 21-15-9 of these 3 movements, right? Maybe it's if it's a shoulder patient, hey, we might do burpees, snatch, and some kettlebell swings. And the reason I chose those is because they involve the shoulder in some way, whether it's stability, press, or strength, or even a high velocity movement like the snatch or the burpee. Sorry, because the pressing it's a strength movement, shoulder press, right? And then push up. We got some scapular stability, some flexion still, and then what was the third movement I said? Oh, kettlebell swing. I mean, you have to engage your shoulder.
Or no, you said burpees.
I did. I just said burpees and then kettlebell swings.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying push-ups.
Yeah.
I was traumatized when you said it. That's why I read that off.
Because I mean, the rep schemes in CrossFit vary so much from, you know, low volume. Like I think the CrossFit Open came out this week, and it was, I want to say deadlifts, running, or rowing, and some other movement. But the deadlift was like 5 reps, I believe. And CrossFitters seeing this are going to be like, no, you were wrong. But It was a low
Right.
amount, and it was like 185. But then right before that, you were doing rowing, which was like 300 meters, I think was the row. I can't remember
Easy.
the third movement, but man, that's why I love CrossFit so much, because I mean, you're hitting all spectrums of
Oh
strength,
yeah.
endurance, um, stability. If you're doing, some gymnastic moves, sometimes we'll have some muscle ups in there, which I've only been able to do one muscle up in my life. But I think that's why I love CrossFit, just because of the variance of schemes. And I think that's why
Yeah.
some people like it so much too, because they get challenged in some way.
Right.
I always tell new CrossFitters that, like, hey, just so you know, it doesn't get easier. It's always going to feel like it's
Just
every
always feels
workout's
like
going
it
to feel like it.
sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're pushing yourself to the max of your strength and your endurance in so many ways. So,
Right.
um, but
I don't.
yeah,
I'm not a CrossFit guy, but to your
uh,
point, when you put it that way,
yeah,
it is nice. But I think when it really hit the world by storm, there was just anytime you have too much of something, it's crazy.
yeah. I
And
mean, P90X. Remember that day? Remember when
oh
that came?
man, yeah, talk about intensity for
Yeah.
full body weight kind of stuff. But I do want to touch on a point because just real quick that you mentioned that, like, yeah, before you do it, the light deadlift or whatever, right? They were just doing a 3,000-meter row or some ridiculous
Hmm.
amount of rowing, which, is a challenge in and of itself, but just because of the time you're having to do it, right? And yes, that is,
Yeah.
to me, it is another explosive maneuver. You're not out kayaking and catching fish. Like, you're trying to crush some meters there on the rowing. And so, and you mentioned it before too, but just talking about like that time under tension, right? And intensity. And, there's a lot of stuff because, yeah, we talked about sets and reps, but to me, the amount of reps and the kind of reps is important, right? So, like, you look at your isometric holds and, you can really turn your
Hmm.
intensity to that. And that can kind of go to endurance too. But, I think that it's an important variable that people don't always think about either. It's just like, hey, just being able to do an exercise for a certain amount of time, is another way that you can kind of do sets and reps. And yes, I'm not doing like a maybe repetition, but holds, right? And so you
Hmm.
can really turn into a whole nother thing where it's just like, I want you to do 50,000 jumps in a minute and good luck, right?
Yeah.
Or, like you said, go do a 3,000-meter row and they're probably knocking that out like dumb quack, dumb quick, dumb quack, dumb quick, and stuff like that. But it's like, and then going into my runners, it's like same kind of thing. Just learning how to hold and be under tension for that amount of time, I think is very important. Like, I started having, and I heard this through another physio who I think she's based out of Australia or UK again, but I really wish I remember her name. Give her a great shout. She's very smart and she deals with like tendinopathies and you know and certain stuff. And so really building into like 5 sets of 45 seconds. Like, I've never heard of a 5 set 45-second range with like good
Hmm.
weight, controllable
What do
weight.
they do? What kind of movements? I'm just intrigued.
Well,
Like,
so for like her instance, we were talking about Achilles tendinopathy, right? I have
okay.
some people right now that like they're just struggling dealing with the
Yeah.
Achilles tendinopathy. And so she was talking about, sometimes you can get like a peritendon inflammation, so like the sheath around the actual tendon itself.
Hmm.
And what was the other one? And like the plantaris muscle too. And so you want to build up strength and go into plyometrics. But in the beginning, she's like, isometrics are your friend because you start building up that tolerance for
Yeah.
load without actually agitating the tissue, right? Without agitating. And so,
Yeah.
and when I think about isometrics, another big one that I've always heard is like 10 sets of 10, or, with balance, you want to do 2 sets of 30 seconds, or etc. Try to get under a minute. And so to kind of hear a mid to higher set range with a pretty good hold, was kind
Yeah.
of like, oh man, what was that? But that was kind of her reasoning. It's like, you need to put the tissue under stress without the movement, right? And So that was kind of her thing. And because when you get below the like horizontal plane, like when you let your heel drop, right, and it can apply a certain amount of stress through the plantaris muscle, which then if it's agitated, it'll just push on the tendon even more, cause more friction. Or if there's a bursitis, she was kind of saying the same thing. You just want to kind of avoid this compression. And then, kind of on the opposite spectrum, she's like, you don't necessarily want to work on eccentrics all the time. Eccentrics are great, but you just kind of build that into your program. So, but yeah, hearing a high isometric with good intensity. And her thing was, you want good weight, but you want them to be able to control it. Like, your bench guy. Like, you don't want them holding it and then they're just like this, because then they're not holding it, right? Like, I have a guy with shoulder arthritis, and anytime I try to hold it and he starts shaking like this, he's like, oh, nope, painful. And it's not like the isometric's painful. It's just that he is reverberating through his joint. Yeah. And so she was saying the same thing. She's like, you're still causing that little friction down there, Yeah. And so it has to be a heavyweight, but they have to be able to actually just like be solid with it. And
that makes me think. I mean, I love to share my shoulder example that I do, because I do this. I mean, I do this very similar thing with the shoulders, is because, but I like to have some precursors too, right? Like, if for me, like, I'm not going to introduce these movements if they don't have precursors, like first of all, somewhat close to full range of motion. For me, when I'm dealing with a flexion based deficit, right? And so if my patient is lacking some flexion, I love to do overhead holds, which is kind of similar to what you're saying right there.
Yeah.
And so this patient, if they have full range of motion, no problem, but then you load them and then they can't bring it up there and at a weight that I would like them to, then I'm all right, let's work on this. We're going to do some mobility, right? And so, which essentially is a hold, right? And I usually make them walk pretty good, probably about a minute or so. I usually, we have our hallway here. I think it's probably about, I don't know, 50 meters, something like that.
It's 100 feet. That's all I know. I don't know what it is in meters.
Okay.
I would have to do that.
I'm way off. I'm way off. That's probably about 20 meters, 25 meters.
Yeah.
So I have them walk down and back, with one arm typically. And so, but yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're building some of that static strength. And again, like I said, I'm treating my shoulders in so many different ways. I mean, it's amazing to see like us talk it out and thought like, hey, we're doing these sets and range for strength. We're doing these sets and range for endurance. And then we're doing these static holds for a long amount of time. I mean, it's just cool to see, so.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to find what her name was, but it was a really cool.
I wanted to correct ourselves on the CrossFit thing. It was 300 meter row, 10 deadlifts, 50 double unders. That's the CrossFit one right now. So
still we can do it better, but no.
20-minute AMRAP too. So it's a 20-minute AMRAP. So
I just, I would love to. Just busy guy out here. Just not for me. I'm just gonna keep running and running. Man, I wish I could find it here, but if I ever find it, I'll put it in a caption or something. Give her credit for that, because it was just a really cool thing that, just like I said, I've never really heard it in terms of that. And like to your point, like it's like you can take that method.
That's the cool thing way better than us, by the way. So
yeah. She definitely did. But and she's done the research on it and stuff like that. But that's that's the cool thing about this, is like everyone's gonna have different hot takes, right? And how you and I think that's the important part of like this kind of podcast, is like learning how to build on that critical thinking skill, not just saying, oh, okay, my knee patient needs to do knee extensions. They kind of hurt a little bit. I'm just going to drop the weight and do 3 sets of 10. It's like, okay, but why? Like what is going to get your patient better quicker?
Yeah. And that's why, people who YouTube how to fix my shoulder, they end up coming to us at some point. Because 100%. What you see online sometimes is very general information, like, hey, this movement might help your shoulder, this will unlock your shoulder, or this, plug in whatever keyword they'll say this movement is going to help. Maybe it's clamshells for the back or whatever it is, but do you really need clamshells for your back right now? You know,
Right.
you don't know. You haven't been evaluated to see if you are truly lacking stability or lacking that movement to help your back. You know, and so yeah, exactly. You know, so YouTube doctor is not always the best doctor. I mean, my suggestion is get evaluated by a clinician that has a good understanding, right? Find out about their clinical experience and see if they are the right fit. Because just like there's, you know, I like to tell people that like I may not be the right fit for you, right?
Yeah.
Someone may know more than me about this certain condition, you know, and I'll tell people, I turn away people because I'm like, hey, I'm probably not the best fit for you based on what you got going on. I think you need to go see someone else. Hey, go see Cole, like, you know, to work on your running, right? Because you treat runners, but you know, that's my I don't love to treat runners, you know, because I'm not as passionate about it as you are, you know. But if I have a CrossFitter coming in here, I'm like, hey, I'm the right fit.
I got you.
I got you, man. But that's why YouTube doctor is not maybe the best doctor for you at times, you know. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, man, I've tried some certain movement for my shoulder or for my running, and it didn't work, like what I would encourage you to do, or if your first therapist didn't work, find another therapist, because we all get exposed to different education and different, you know, clinical experience that might make us a better fit for you. And so sometimes I'll tell patients that like, hey, like you didn't buy the first house you looked at, right? You know, you looked at multiple houses and found the one that's a good fit for you. And so hope that analogy holds up. But that's what I tell people. So.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's a great point actually to piggyback off, right? You know, just like, man, I've seen this on, or like, yeah, you prescribe a clamshell. I'm like, man, everyone does clamshells. It's like, okay, but are you doing it correctly? Let's see it. No. Okay, well, that's step one, right? Or sets like, oh, they just tell you, just try some clamshells. They'll really help your lower back. It's like, okay, they tell you how many to do. They just told you to do it, or attention. You know, to your point, it's kind of like this miracle of like, okay, the information's out there, which is great, but then like having the understanding and going to a really educated provider of saying, okay, this is how you actually apply it, though, right? To get you better. So that application, that, you know, that prescription, like we mentioned earlier, that this is how you're going to get better. And so, you know, I'm going to double down on what you said. And definitely, you know, if you're in the DFW area, for sure, you're a CrossFitter, go see Mr. Larry over there at On Point Movement. And then if you're a runner, I'm going to double down myself. Obviously, you can come reach out to me, Richardson, or kind of South Frisco at Phoenix Fit. But yeah, you can't take everything you hear and just assume it's going to work for you, right? Go get evaluated by someone that you trust, whether you got to go shop around. I like to use the analogy for car shopping because everyone typically doesn't buy the first car they see either. So I'm definitely on that. But you know, closing up here. Oh, which I found that that physio, her name was Ebony Rio, Ebonnie. So I have no idea if I said that. It could be Ebony Rio. But yeah, she had some really good stuff on some tendinopathy and some progressions with athletes and tendinopathy. So in terms of looking up her work, I definitely look at it. If anyone out there is interested, if I find any links, I'll definitely connect it to her because she was really smart about everything.
Just Fly Sports is the name of her podcast. I just found it.
Yeah, awesome. There
Just
you go.
Fly Performance Podcast.
But yeah, so before we sign off, which I think that was a great first podcast, my good sir, and lots of good ranting. Hopefully everyone kind of got a good nugget out of there of why, you know, 3 sets of 10 is a great starting point, but it's not the end all magic number kind of thing. Right. And so, I think, like we said, just kind of go out and find a person that's going to help you and listen to your needs and get you to your goals. And I think it was a really good time, fun time, always fun and laughing. But
what are we going to talk about next?
Right. What are we going to talk about next? We'll have a couple of weeks to brainstorm now. I'll put some stuff in there. But any last minute thoughts on your end that you want to kind of tag on, my good sir?
Man, not that I can think of, man. Just I think this is all good. I don't have any last thoughts. No final thoughts for me.
No final thoughts. All right. Well, for all those people that are listening to this podcast, feel free to subscribe for future episodes. Like you said, we'll come up with a great content for you. And if you have any suggestions that you want to hear our hot takes on, or just explain more in depth, feel free to add them down below in the comments, and we'll answer them as best we can. But all right, I'll let you get to your patient care, and we'll go from there.
All right, man. See you later.
Let's see. Yeah. And always can edit. That's the fun thing. Always can edit.
You can always edit.